Dear God, just thank you so much for giving us so much, and just really using these past couple weeks to think about that. And I ask that you speak through Mr. Johnson, and that all glory goes to you, God, and that we come out here more thankful than we were before. In your name I pray. Amen.
That year I was a backup point guard, and the senior was starting ahead of me, but he came down with a knee injury, and so as you can imagine, not necessarily going straight into the starting role, but I kind of came about it, and that year we kept going further and farther than anybody else had predicted us going. Not because of me, but because of great people around me. We made it to the state championship and won that year against our arch rival. Be like you beating Westland. And it was amazing. I mean, I was going nuts, cutting down the net, going crazy. I finally reached what I wanted to do. I won a state championship with my best friend in the world. A month later, we transitioned to baseball season, and I was still on cloud nine, so much so that I felt like I was kind of in like a High School Musical episode. Now, don't judge me yet, okay, I promise. But I felt like, I had my Letterman on, had my state championship patch, had my ring, and I was like, oh yeah, look at me. I'm the best ever, and my pump-up song is "I'm the Tiger," so it's kind of like every time I came to the classroom, me being a freshman and being all 5'3" of me, coming into the classroom, and there's like a spotlight on me, and it was like, it's the I'm the Tiger. That's how I felt. That's how I felt. I was on cloud nine. I was like, God, thank you. Kind of like in what the verse that just was put on. I was like, God, thank you. You're amazing. I got a state ring. I got it all. I got my dad. Everything's great. And then a month went by, and I'll never forget it. And even now, it's like it was yesterday, because my dad came through the room and told me, hey, Brandon, I've got something to talk with you about. Not really thinking anything, because we always talk. He came up to me and said, hey, I just sit down. And so he said, hey, Brandon, I've got to tell you something. I've got cancer. You want to talk about something that rocked my world? I went from cloud nine all the way to the deepest valley, because then he proceeded to tell me it was not only cancer, but stage 4. And I was saying, God, why? I was angry. I was saying, God, why could you? After all I've done for you, this is the least that you can do, is just give me cancer, give my dad cancer? See, my dad was not only my best friend and my dad, he was my coach. So it felt like as though I had 3 people affected by this one deadly disease. And so as the days progressed, the inevitable happened. He started slowly disintegrating. Some things I'll never forget that I want to share with you. One, March Madness is a big deal to me and my dad. So as we predicted the bracket, I remember instead of watching it on some flat screen or at Taco Mac or whatever, we had to just settle for the hospital bedroom. And I had to climb in there next to him in bed because he had chemotherapy running through both of his arms. And I had to just watch it on this little screen up in the corner. And I'll never forget it. I also remember the time where my dad ended up losing all of his hair, and he had acne all over his face, and you couldn't even recognize him. The strong father that I knew was finally weak, and he was helpless. And so I remember crying. I remember nights where I would go into his room, and I would literally crawl right next to him, and I would just cry. I don't even know why. I just started crying. He started crying, and we didn't know what to do. I remember times with my dad that he would look outside, again with a fanny pack on, with chemotherapy running through his body. And I remember those times where he couldn't make it to the basketball game that year. And he looked at me and he said, hey, Brandon, can you hear that? And I can hear him vividly. And he said, you hear those birds? And I said, yes, absolutely. And he said, I'm just thankful that God gave me another day today. And in that moment, I felt like Psalms 138, 7 through 8, when it says, when I walk into the thick of trouble, keep me alive in the angry turmoil. Finish what you started in me. Don't quit on me now, God. Don't quit on me now. A year went by, and my mom finally brought me to the hospital room, and she said, Brandon, I've got some news for you. And I went into the hospital room, and I remember sitting down with my mom, and she told me, your dad only has 3 more days to live. You need to say your final goodbyes. I remember like it was yesterday, going down the narrow hallway. And in that narrow hallway, it was the last door on the left. And I remember looking in my dad's face for the last time. He didn't even know I was there. And I finally said my final goodbye, and I said, Dad, I love you. I'll take care of Mom. I want to follow in your footsteps, Dad. I love you. Goodbye. You want to to talk about the hardest thing I've ever had to do, that's to say goodbye to my 3 people, my dad, coach, and best friend. We're gone. In one day. Gone. And now basketball didn't mean anything anymore. I didn't care about basketball. I could care less about my state ring. In fact, someone asked me why you don't wear your state ring. To be honest, it hurts too much. I don't want to wear it. It's nothing now, because my dad's gone. Time progressed, and I got angry at God. I said, God, why? Why me? Out of everybody in the world, why would you take the closest person to me, my dad? But little did I know that God had a purpose through my life. Let me add a note. God has a purpose in your life. He does. Good or bad. Good or bad, God's got a purpose in your life. And He's not finished with you yet. And He wasn't finished with me. Because you see, in that moment of time, I started realizing God had a purpose because my best friend, now my wife, ended up, the only girl I ever dated, came because of my dad passing away. Long story. If you want to hear it, join my class. Number 2, the second thing that happened is God was able to allow me to put in a book the relationship between my Heavenly Father and earthly Father, and be able to pass that book out, and I called it In the Steps of My Father. Little did I know that that would relate to what my life is all about. Because the reason why I'm standing here is not because of anything that I've done, but because of what God has done in and through my life, and the fact that He's allowed this thing of cancer to affect my life and affect my family. The reason why I wanted to become a coach and a teacher was just because of that, my dad. I saw the impact that he had, and I wanted it. And it all resulted from my dad dying of cancer. You might say, Coach Johnson, why are you sharing this story? That's a great question. I appreciate you for asking that. The reason why I want to tell you this story is because I know right now in a group this size, and even talking with people and praying for different